Linda Moulton Howe, born January 20th, 1942, is an American investigative journalist and regional Emmy Award-winning documentary filmmaker, best known for her work as a ufologist and advocate of a variety of conspiracy theories, including her investigation of cattle mutilations and conclusion that they are performed by extraterrestrials. She is also noted for her speculations that the U.S. government is working with aliens. One Idaho State Director of Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, called her the most preeminent UFO investigator in the world, and she was named as one of the gurus of American ufology, although Howe has said she regards herself as a television producer and investigative reporter. This six-part lecture covers extraterrestrial life incorporating specific and advanced software programming into their human contact, with things like crop circles, suppressed technology, and even case studies involving binary code transmitted to contactees in a recordable, documentable format. If you enjoy content about the UFO phenomenon, I invite you to subscribe to the Storyist for more deep dives into the archives of history.
Thank you so much. You are a metaphor for the awakening of crowds of people now that are beginning to realize that there is the possibility of getting to truth, whether governments are with us or not. And I want to thank Michael for the invitation to speak in this first Awakening UFO happening, and to thank Andrew Kleek, CEO and founder of Awakening UFO, who made it possible to produce this event, and let's give them a cheer. And I want to thank Vitaly Safarov. He and I worked by Skype for many hours between England and my place in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And the idea was to expand my slides to fit on this big screen. And so thank you, Vitaly. Where are you? There he is, right there. There's Vitaly. And Mike, Ebrar, and all of the guys on the video and audio tech. I understand how difficult it is to work in a large room like this, and I am extremely grateful that we now have sound and video. Let's give them a hand. When the organizer of this wonderful awakening event picked me up at the Manchester airport on Thursday morning, he told me, I have been pushed by something I don't understand that wants the truth out about UFOs and ETs, and I end up doing this awakening. And that complex truth is what I've been hunting and reporting about since 1979, and my TV documentary investigation of worldwide bloodless animal mutilations. And to my great surprise, it was law enforcement, the sheriffs and the deputies, who told me then in 1979, quote, "The perpetrators are creatures from outer space," close quote. Now, nearly 4 decades later, we have rovers exploring on Mars and spacecraft showing us the first close-up images of Pluto's icy mountains and the bright white magnesium salt deposits in the crater on the dwarf planet Ceres. And news that at the bottom of the 30-mile deep ocean on Saturn's moon Enceladus, there is hot water at nearly 200 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 93 degrees Celsius, gushing from the seafloor and spouting through the surface ice, apparently heated by radioactive material in the core. And that has provoked scientists to wonder, if there are swimming creatures in that surprisingly warm moon water. As the future rushes toward us with a persistent mixture of lies and truth, I would like to sharpen focus on what happened 70 years ago when the front page of the Roswell Daily Record on July 8, 1947 was headlined, quote, "Roswell Army Airfield captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region. No details of flying disc are revealed," close quote. The truth? We now know it was not a disc. There were 3 crashed UFOs, and they were shaped like the heel of a man's shoe. There was a thunderstorm late at night on July 3rd to 4th, 1947, when 3 aerial objects merged on radar before 3 crash sites were found. The headline about the one came from Colonel William Blanchard. He was the commanding officer of the 509th Bomb Wing at the Roswell Army Airfield. Colonel Blanchard ordered his public information officer, Walter Hott, to issue a press release announcing that one of those flying saucers that people had been reporting that summer had crashed northwest of Roswell near Corona. Strange debris had been found by sheep rancher Mac Brazel on July 4th. 3 days later, on July 7th, the chief of the Roswell Army Airfield's 509th Bomber Group Intelligence Unit, Lieutenant Colonel Jesse Marcel Sr., went to the Brazel Ranch with Counterintelligence Corps agent Sheridan Cabot to investigate, and they gathered up peculiar silver foil, and it folded just like cloth, and then it would spring open, and they would do this just like cloth, and it would return to a perfect, unwrinkled surface. And there were also long, thin I-beams with purple symbols on them. The next day, on July 8th, after the story broke on the front page of the Roswell Daily Record, the head of the 8th Air Force in Fort Worth, Texas, Brigadier General Roger Ramey, on the left in this photo, held a press conference with his chief of staff, Colonel Thomas Dubose, and they said, and this was a lie and they knew it, there was no flying saucer. They said it was just a weather balloon that exploded in the thunderstorm. And to strengthen that phony story, General Ramey had pieces of shredded weather balloons spread on the floor to be photographed so that newspapers would run the concocted story specifically to keep the public and media from knowing about the alien presence. Even Lieutenant Colonel Jesse Marcel Sr. was asked to fly from Roswell to Fort Worth, Texas, to pose, and it was posing like for a magazine, for photos amid weather balloon debris. But Colonel Marcel knew that what he had gathered that day before from the Brazel Ranch was not a weather balloon. 5 years later, in 1952, President Truman's Majestic 12 special panel said in their first annual report about the retrieval of, quote, unidentified plan-form space vehicles. And for those of you who may not have heard that word plan-form before tonight, this is a word that we find over and over in the 1940s, real documents of which this majestic first annual report, as far as Stanton Friedman and I and others are concerned, this is the real deal. And they were using the word planform for something that was delta-shaped and had swoopy curves. And here is right inside of this report, quote, radar film and tower logs do not explain the merging of 3 radar targets prior to collision and subsequent crashes. There were 5 recovered bodies, and recovered is misspelled in the original report. 2 of which were found in a severely damaged escape cylinder, and the remaining 3 bodies were found some distance away from the cylinder. All 5 appeared to have suffered from sudden decompression and heat suffocation, another misspelled word in the original document. So there were 3 radar targets, 3 crash sites. Landing Zone 1 was near Corona, about 75 miles northwest of Roswell. An interplanetary phenomenon unit summary, that's what they called themselves, on July 22nd, 1947, in its paragraph 12, stated these words, quote, "The most disturbing aspect of this investigation was there were other bodies found not far from LZ1 that looked as if they had been dissected as you would a frog," close quote. Without explaining whether the bodies dissected as you would a frog were animal, human, or alien. Quote, "Animal parts were reportedly discovered inside the craft at Landing Zone 2, close quote, about 1986. I met somebody who knew firsthand about that specific crash at White Sands. And they told me that they knew for a fact there were photographs, animal parts were in compartments that went all the way around the inside of an interior round room. One of the reasons why the government felt it could not speak and could not allow any facts out. Landing Zone 2 was 20 miles southeast of Socorro, not far from Oscura Peak. That's the lower right, red circle, southeast of the Trinity site in White Sands Proving Ground, where the United States tested its first atomic bomb 2 years earlier in July of 1945. And Landing Zone 2 is where the animal parts were reportedly found inside what was called a well-preserved capsule that might have been ejected from the crashed vehicle at Landing Zone 1 near Corona. Now, Landing Zone 3 was 30 miles east of Alamogordo on the Mescalero Indian Reservation, and that third UFO had hit the ground so hard that it was crumpled like an accordion. That reference plan form in the Majestic 12 Project's first annual report in 1952 was referenced in documents as delta or crescent-shaped ships, never as the oval or the circles, and that it was compared to the shape of the heel of a man's shoe, and that is the shape in this photograph taken over Phoenix, Arizona on July 7th, 1947. This is the same week as the Roswell crashes. The box camera photo was by William A. Rhodes. I've interviewed him, talked to him at length about his being a person who did freelance photography for the local newspaper. He had his box camera nearby. He sees this thing moving in the sky, and he goes and gets these amazing photos. And he had been a flight instructor during World War II at Falcons Field in Phoenix, so he was very aware of what he recognized in the sky and what he thought was truly bizarre, and this was in that category. 2 days later, on Wednesday, July 9th, 1947, the Arizona Republic in Phoenix put the Rhodes photograph of the crescent-shaped aerial plan form on its front page, but they got it upside down. This same plan form shape has been described and sketched by other retired military eyewitnesses who have seen the same delta-shaped, but turned back up right ways. General Ramey's goal was to carry out orders for a strict policy of denial and secrecy for the deeply concerned President Harry Truman. Allegedly, Truman and FDR had already dealt with a UFO and 3 dead aliens 6 full years before. In a recent book called Mo means Missouri, Mo 41, The Bombshell Before Roswell, author Paul Blake Smith writes that on the night of April 12, 1941, a crescent-shaped UFO crashed near Cape Girardeau, Missouri. Cape Girardeau is 115 miles southeast of St. Louis. Sikeston is 35 miles south of Cape Girardeau, and that's where the Missouri Institute for Aeronautics in Sikeston allegedly went from Sikeston and retrieved a crescent-shaped craft and 3 identical small bodies, quote, this is from people there at that time, not from this world, close quote. This was out in farm country about 8 miles south of Cape Girardeau. And today, we would call those 3 beings clones. One MJ-12 document leaked in the 1990s to aerospace engineer Dr. Bob Wood is entitled MJ-12 Project White Hot Intelligence Estimate Preliminary, dated September 19, 1947. Now that is only 2.5 months after the Roswell region's UFO crashes. They were moving fast. Classified magic eyes only, spelled M-A-J, it's always been M-A-J-I-C. It is an acronym for, the first word is majority, the second word is agency, for joint intelligence, and magic spelled with a J in the United States is the highest known security classification. In part 3, Scientific Probabilities, it states, quote, based on all available evidence collected from recovered exhibits, meaning the plan-form UFOs, currently under study by, and this paper lists 11 government and military agencies and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Those craft are deemed extraterrestrial in nature. This conclusion was reached as a result of comparisons of artifacts from the Missouri discovery in 1941, meaning Cape Girardeau. The technology is outside the scope of U.S. science. It is even outside that of German rocket and aircraft development, close quote. Part 2, Technical Evaluation, paragraph 18 states, quote, the following elements were analyzed and found to exist in the small neutronic power plant that was found inside of U-Lot 1. This is another acronym for UFO planform, and this one stands for Unidentified Lenticular-Shaped Aerodyne. Even the recovery case of 1941, meaning Cape Girardeau, Missouri, did not create a unified intelligence effort to exploit possible technological gains, with the exception of the Manhattan Project, close quote. In simple terms, they're saying with a kind of criticism back in the 40s, we didn't come together to exploit the technological gain of extraterrestrial technology. And the only place where we did collaborate was in the Manhattan Project. The reference to the Manhattan Project means physicist Robert Oppenheimer had the Cape Girardeau neutronic power plant to study during his development of the atomic bomb first dropped on Japan in August 1945 that ended World War II. That also implies that Presidents Roosevelt and Truman already knew about an alien presence during World War II. They knew about it from April 12, 1941. And this is long before the July 1947 Roswell crashes. It means our government is very skilled in keeping secrets and pretending that everything is weather balloons or swamp gas. And those men running the government in the US made a decision to keep everything secret about UFOs and the ETs that they had retrieved, both dead and alive. And for those of you who may not know, FDR, George Marshall, Secretary.
And so, as we close part one of this deep dive into the shadows of government secrecy and extraterrestrial encounters, we're left with even more questions than answers. The retrieval programs, both of the dead and the living alien entities, are not just conspiracy, but a documented reality buried under layers of classified black operations and sworn testimonies not just from this lecture, but also from other whistleblowers on my channel, like Dan Burish and Phil Schneider. The consistency of all these stories are really remarkable. I look forward to seeing you when part 2 is released. Thank you for returning to review part 2 with me. This part of the lecture covers some very interesting claims about corporate patented technology not of this world. While this has been claimed for some time, it's very interesting to see it still happening in plain sight today. Former Blink-182 singer Tom DeLonge's UFO research organization keeps giving us reasons to take it more seriously. The group, called To the Stars Academy, just signed an agreement with the U.S. Army in which it will help the military study and develop advanced materials for the purposes of developing active camouflage, beamed energy propulsion, and quantum communication for use on military vehicles. The government is interested, specifically, in studying inertial mass reduction, a type of far future propulsion, mechanical structural metamaterials, electromagnetic metamaterial waveguides, quantum physics, active camouflage quantum communications, beamed energy propulsion. If this content intrigues you, I invite you to subscribe to The Storyist, where we explore just how deep the rabbit hole goes with the UFO alien phenomena.
Of War, Cordell Hull, Secretary of State, Harry S. Truman, who was head of a Democrat committee having to do with the funding of what was called then the War Office. Remember, there was no Department of Defense, there was no Pentagon, there was no Area 51. It was Washington, D.C. and the Capitol. They were all 33rd degree Masons. And there are sub-stories to this about how those men knew a lot, but they were used to keeping secrets. And they decided that this had to be a secret to be kept. Much of the content in those early reports was drawn from what Lieutenant General Nathan Twining discovered on his secret mission for President Truman soon after the New Mexico crashes. That's when General Twining viewed the 5 alien bodies and craft found at Landing Zone 2 near Oscura Peak and the Trinity site at White Sands. In 1947, General Twining was commander of the Air Materiel Command. 10 years later, President Eisenhower would appoint him chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. By July 16, 1947, only 1 week after the Roswell Daily headline, General Twining sent President Truman this 2-page report about what he saw for himself at the Landing Zone 2 crash site near Oscura Peak on the White Sands Proving Ground. Quote, upon examination of the interior of the craft, a compartment exhibiting a possible atomic engine was discovered. In the power room was a donut-shaped tube approximately 35 feet in diameter, made of what appears to be a plastic material that is surrounding a central core. This tube was translucent, approximately 1 inch thick. The tube appeared to be filled with a clear substance, possibly a heavy water. This activation of electrical potential is believed to be the primary power to the reactor, though it is only a theory at present. Just how a heavy water reactor functions in this environment is unknown. On the deck of the power room, there are what resembles typewriter keys, possibly reactor power plant controls. There were no conventional electronics, no wiring to be seen, connecting these controls to the propulsion turret. Now, I was told in the 80s about these strange keys that were found in one of the crashes. And I was told that they were discussed by people who were there and retrieved as looking like strange hieroglyph-type symbols. Think of Egypt. Those are hieroglyphs. Tibet, for example, would be lines and dots. Hieroglyphs, think of Egypt. The 1952 MJ-12 first annual report said, quote, "The technology may be eons ahead of us," meaning thousands of years beyond us on Earth. Another military insider from World War II and the Eisenhower and Kennedy presidencies did a 1997 book entitled The Day After Roswell about what he knew firsthand of UFO extraterrestrial technologies and ETs while working in the Pentagon. Lieutenant Colonel Philip J. Corso worked as chief of the Pentagon's Foreign Technology Desk for General Arthur Trudeau. Trudeau was handpicked by President Dwight Eisenhower in 1958 to be director of the first Army Research and Development Program in the Pentagon, and Corso told me directly from General Trudeau to Colonel Corso that when General Eisenhower came to General Trudeau, they had both known each other during World War II as generals. And General Eisenhower respected General Trudeau the most of all of the military leaders that he knew, because General Trudeau at that time was the only general that had a PhD, and General Trudeau's PhD was in chemistry, a very unusual combination in a high-ranking military officer. And Colonel Corso said, General Trudeau told me that when General Eisenhower, who became president, contacted General Trudeau, he said, quote, "I consider the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States to be an enemy, equal an enemy as our Russian spies, because I think it is filled with Russian spies." And when he said that, he said he explained to General Trudeau that that was why he wanted everything related to extraterrestrial technology and the back engineering to be handled only by General Trudeau, an Army general that President Eisenhower trusted. General Trudeau, on the right, handpicked Colonel Corso after their trusted days together in World War II. Colonel Corso told me that he met with General Trudeau in his Pentagon office, where the general went over to 5-drawer filing cabinets, had Corso come over, pulled open one of the top drawers, said, "Look," and pulled out what ended up being some kind of a laser projection device, picked up what we now would know as semiconductor chips, picked up various things from inside this file cabinet, as the general told Colonel Corso, "Your job is going to be to hand deliver these ET technologies to corporate leaders that he, General Trudeau, had personally contacted, and that those would be the only person, no matter how big the company, only one person would know that they came from UFOs, extraterrestrials, and that it was technology that we were desperate to back engineer. And this became this huge goal. If you patent in the United States and you put some sort of a corporate logo on it, you are outside of Congress. You are outside of the government. You are protected by laws in the United States, and that was their goal. Get everything they could that was extraterrestrial into the secret hands of corporations that could be patented, and no one, no taxpayer would have any right to any information from the government. And no one in Congress, no one in the Supreme Court, and let alone the taxpayers in the United States would know anything about what was happening since World War II. General Trudeau and Colonel Corso were the beginning of the United States' serious efforts to develop a secret space program. Yes, it has existed since the end of the 1950s, that would use retrieved extraterrestrial technology for advancement. Meanwhile, NASA, under CIA control, NASA has always been birthed under the umbrella of the CIA, despite its presentation to the world as being a public agency. NASA would be the public camouflage for what was behind the scenes, a dark and growing underbelly of America, spending trillions of secret dollars, but unknown and untouchable. In June 1997, Time magazine did a cover story on the 50th anniversary of the Roswell crashes, and I was there to speak for that 50th commemoration. There I met and talked with Colonel Corso about his work for General Trudeau, and when Colonel Corso was introduced to me, he extended his hand to shake mine, and he said, "Linda, how the hell did you get so much classified information?" And I laughed because all of my information had come from real ranchers and real people in the human abduction syndrome, showing that our government did not have control over everything that was happening between an alien presence and the general public. And he meant the animal mutilations that I had investigated from my TV documentary, A Strange Harvest, that was first broadcast May 28, 1980 on Denver's CBS station KMGH-TV, where I was director of special projects. That's when sheriffs and ranchers told me the perpetrators of the bloodless, trackless animal deaths were, quote, creatures from outer space, close quote. Ranchers had seen glowing lights in night skies emit beams down into their pastures. A few had even seen a cow lifted up in a beam of light or lowered to a pasture dead and mutilated. But none of those eyewitnesses would stand up in front of my TV camera for fear of ridicule from their fellow human beings. Before he died, Colonel Corso talked to me in private about the highly classified documents he had read in Washington, D.C., dated as early as 1951, 1951, about animals found in several parts of the world with bloodless excisions and no tracks around them. Colonel Corso said the classified reports that he read specified that the perpetrators of animal mutilations were, and these were the words he used, extraterrestrial biological entities. But why? This illustration is by a Missouri horse rancher in 1975 who saw this glowing being at his gate during a time when he found several newborn foals and young horses bloodlessly mutilate in his pasture. Eventually, our government would realize that many of the UFO pilots and other non-human entities were cloned androids or human ET hybrids produced from genetic harvests from Earth life, including animal mutilations and human sperm and egg extractions during abductions. Our government, according to Colonel Corso, learned that in spite of the mutilations and abductions, some ETs really are friendly, and they want humanity to advance faster to be more protected from unfriendly, hostile ETs. So there was urgency in General Trudeau's goal to get alien technologies back engineered and patented as fast as possible, to keep them from Germany and Russia, and to support a secret space program that might have to, quote, do battle in real Star Wars, close quote. About secret ET technology transfer to American corporations for back engineering and patents, Colonel Corso wrote, General Trudeau also had relationships with the Army contractors who were developing new weapon systems for the military within a small part of any given company, while another part was harvesting some of the same ET technology for consumer product development. These were companies such as Bell Labs, IBM, Monsanto, Dow, RCA that became General Electric, and the aviation and medical companies of Howard Hughes, close quote. At that July 1997 50th anniversary conference, Dr. Jesse Marcel Jr. handed me this replica of the thin I-beam that he remembered holding in the first week of July 1947. That's when his father, Jesse Marcel Sr., the head of intelligence at the Roswell Army Airfield, woke up Jesse and his mother to show them pieces of strange silver foil and I-beams that Jesse Marcel Sr. had picked up at one of the 3 UFO crash sites that first week of July 1947. This is the one between Roswell and Corona, known as Landing Zone 1. Jesse Marcel Sr. said the metallic foil was like cloth that could be folded or crumpled up, but would always return to its original perfect, flat, unwrinkled shape. Today, we would call it memory metal, but it's taken a long time to get to that now. Jesse Jr. told me his father said the debris, quote, at the kitchen table, he said this to the mother and son, this was not of this earth, close quote. Young Jesse Marcel was most curious about what he described as metallic, pinkish purple hieroglyphs or symbols that ran along the entire length of a tan-colored I-beam only 3/8 of an inch wide. The I-beam was so lightweight that Jesse Jr. said he could barely feel it in his hand. It was more just like the presence of air. Plastics didn't exist publicly in 1947, but eyewitnesses would later on compare the I-beams to a new lightweight plastic or a balsa wood. There were rumors that scientists had discovered the I-beams were an exotic hybrid of metal-like wood, both organic and inorganic molecules mixed in this substance. It could not be cut or burned. Intelligence officer Jesse Marcel Sr. would himself compare the strange pink-purple symbols to, quote, indecipherable Chinese writing, close quote. Perhaps we're back to that word hieroglyphics. 12 years after the 1947 Roswell UFO cover-up began, Brigadier General Stephen Lufkin has said that he was briefed in the Pentagon in 1959, this would be 12 years later, about the Roswell UFO crashes, and he was shown physical I-beams with what he called purplish, and he used the word encryptions. Encryption means encoding messages or information in such a way that only authorized parties can read it. Another source, Steve Lytle, reported that his mathematician father was asked by government authorities to, quote, decipher the I-beam symbols, close quote, but no one was able to. And those weren't the only mysterious symbols to show up on UFOs. In 1803, we're really going back in time, on the east coast of Japan, in the Hitachi province, fishermen reported that a pale, red-headed, alien-looking woman suddenly emerged from under the ocean waters in a round craft that had symbols on its surface. The woman was inside the craft clutching a box. Eyewitnesses called her Utsuro Bune, meaning ship hole, because her sea craft was shaped like a rice bowl. People who saw the craft said the top was like glass or crystal. When the red-haired woman spoke, it was in a language that no Japanese person had ever heard before. What language was she speaking? Where did she come from? What was in that box? Nobody knows. Eyewitnesses claimed the same red-haired woman and craft were reported in other parts of Japan as if she were flying around in the craft. She was always reported to be tightly holding the box. 177 years later, on December 26, 1980, after midnight, Staff Sergeant James Penniston at RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge in England would also encounter a strange craft with symbols in Rendlesham Forest. When Sergeant Penniston dragged his fingers over the symbols, his mind was filled with zeros and ones of binary code and telepathic impressions of a time machine from a distant future where an advanced civilization was dying out. Its mission was to harvest genetic material from Earth to use as, quote, band-aids to extend the future civilization's survival. There was no pilot. The triangular craft operated with alien self-activating software. Now here is a comparison of two Utsuro Bune symbols marked with red circles that are variations on the...
As part 2 is completed, we can certainly see some consistency in the earlier claims of those working on the earlier government classified projects. I, like many of you, also find some very odd instances of coincidence today. On November 13th, 2024, we started to see all the major news organizations discuss an outbreak of drone activity across New Jersey. Postings on social media were everywhere showing these drones people were capturing. These reports suddenly stopped having incidents reported on the national networks after President Biden left office and Trump began his presidency.
We have no evidence at this
It would be illogical for one not to wonder why so many plane crashes have been reported just after these drone sightings have taken place. Here's some very scary, interesting information from the law offices of Arnold and Itkin. The title of the article is 78 Lives Lost, Examining the Surge in 2025 Plane Crashes. And I quote, "Air travel is widely regarded as one of the safest modes of transportation. A 2024 MIT study revealed that commercial air travel has become roughly twice as safe every decade, but recent headlines paint a more sobering picture. On January 29th, 67 people were killed when an American Airlines aircraft collided with an Army helicopter over the Potomac River. Another 10 people were lost on February 6th when a commuter plane crashed in Alaska, leaving wreckage across the Bering Sea. On February 10th, a pilot was killed and 4 passengers were injured when a private jet veered off the runway at Scottsdale Municipal Airport.
any
On
national
February
security or
12th,
malicious intent
two
or
Navy
criminal
pilots were
activity.
forced to
But,
eject
Jackie, I would
just
remind
before
you,
their
we're at the beginning
EA-18G
here, not the
Growler
end.
crashed into San
There's a lot
Diego
more work
Bay.
to be done, and we're
On
working
February
closely with the state and
17th,
local
at least
authorities to
15
gain
people
more
were
information.
injured when a Delta flight crashed
I
while
would
landing at
argue that
Toronto Pearson
we're
International
moving.
Airport. One more not listed on the website, as it just recently happened, is the tragedy of a Bell 206 Long Ranger that claimed the lives of 6 people, a family of 5, and a pilot. We have seen an unusually high number of incidents in early 2025, leading many to question why. Is this sudden wave of airplane accidents truly a statistical outlier, or does it hint at deeper issues like inadequate training, faulty equipment, or lapses in safety oversight? How is it that as our technology gets better with time, that safety when traveling on aircraft wouldn't be better than each previous year? The numbers of deaths listed on this site converts to 19.5 deaths per month, from January of 2025 until April pending. There isn't any more fatal aircraft crashes by the end of this month in the United States. It's a good thing the drones knew when to stop making their presence known. I hope you join me for part 3. Thank you for joining me on reviewing part 3 of Linda's lecture. In the early days of computing, every machine spoke its own language. IBM used EBCDIC, teletypes used Bordeaux code, chaos reigned. Then, in 1963, a committee of engineers, including the legendary Bob Bemer, the father of ASCII, united under the American Standards Association ASA to create one universal code. This was before emojis, before Unicode, and before the internet even breathed its first packet of data. There was ASCII, a 7-bit system using 128 possible characters, enough for English letters, uppercase and in lowercase, including numbers and punctuation. The American Standard Code for Information Interchange. A digital Rosetta Stone, if you will, that turned letters into numbers, and numbers into machine-readable binary. It's interesting to point out ASCII is still in use for many devices today, which may be explained by what you're about to review. If you're like me, and find UFO phenomena interesting, I invite you to subscribe to my channel where we cover some of the most historical cases documented. Thank you for watching The Storyist.
Peniston triangle and circle symbols in the lower left. And we're going to see this triangle circle symbol again as recently as the end of June 2015 in another UFO encounter. But first, going back to August 28, 1991, 11 years after Sergeant Peniston touched the symbols on the alien craft in Rendlesham Forest, Soviet authorities were tracking a UFO on a zigzag course at 4,225 miles an hour. That's 6,800 kilometers an hour. The rapid radar track vanished over Kyrgyzstan. A year later, in June 1992, a search party found a cylinder-shaped craft with strange green symbols on it. The investigators reported, quote, powerful electromagnetic field emanating from this wreckage, close quote. All photographs and videotape recordings were overexposed, allegedly from radiation at the site. The craft had crashed in the Shaitan Mazar Gorge, also known as the Devil's Grave, in the central Tian Shan Mountains of eastern Kyrgyzstan. And then 14 years later, in late June of 2015, an Army sergeant with his wife, 2 young children, dog, and cat began moving from Hunter Army Airfield near Richmond Hill, Georgia, on the Atlantic Ocean to Fort Carson in Colorado Springs, Colorado, planning to go through Atlanta. He set his truck's GPS for the route, and they planned to travel at night when it was cooler with less traffic and stay in motels during the day. The husband, that I call Sergeant CJ, and his wife were shocked when a bright white light in the sky suddenly came down very rapidly toward their truck. The Army sergeant estimated that the disc hovering above their truck was 820 feet long, that's nearly 3 football fields, and nearly 200 feet high. There were bright white sparks projected out beyond the craft front and back. Below the midline, there was a row of 5 dark-colored symbols, and he told me, quote, "In the Army, I'm a trained observer. I've been doing this for 15 years. I'm able to identify high-velocity rounds as well as mortars, rockets, artillery, aircraft, all types of aircraft. I'm trained to do that for whatever comes down in front of us on military missions. This huge craft was beyond anything that I had ever been trained for," close quote. Sergeant CJ's wife remembered the UFO's surface glistened like an oil slick of rainbow colors when it tilted toward them. She also thought there were round lights around the perimeter. The encounter was from 1:25 to 1:29 a.m. Eastern on the early morning of June 29, 2015, according to Sergeant CJ's digital watch that he looked at when the craft disappeared by blinking out in front of them. It didn't move, it just simply disappeared in front of their truck. The couple felt confused and disoriented. Sergeant CJ drove up the road a few miles and found a Shake Rag Express on Highway 1 South. When he tried to get out of the truck, he said his legs felt like wet noodles as if he could not stand up, and he didn't know what was wrong. But the greater shock was when he bought some food. The Shake Rag Express receipt showed they were in Wadley, Georgia, way off their GPS course to Atlanta and on to Colorado. The couple had no idea how they were diverted north without realizing it from their GPS programmed route that should have taken 4.5 hours for the 250-mile drive from Richmond Hill, Georgia via Route 16 to Route 75 into Atlanta. But what happened next implies that the diversion on Route 1 north to the rural countryside of Wadley, Georgia, was under the control of an alien intelligence in order to transmit binary information into Sergeant CJ's mind. First, let's compare the June 29, 2015 Wadley craft symbols with the December 26, 1980 Rendlesham Forest incident. The far left symbol on the Wadley, Georgia disc seems to match the far left bottom symbol that Staff Sergeant James Pennison sketched after touching the raised symbols on the black, glassy triangular craft in Rendlesham Forest, England, near RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge Air Force Base on December 26, 1980. Also, Sergeant Pennison's ring around the triangle with the 2 black circles resembles the second symbol from the right on the Wadley disc that has a ring around a triangle with 3 smaller circles, similar to Sergeant Pennison's ring triangle with 2 circles. Sergeant CJ and his wife were very confused about what had happened, and CJ continued driving northwest to Atlanta again on a different road. They finally checked into the Magnuson Hotel in Kennesaw, north of Atlanta, at 7:36 a.m. on June 29, 2015. They slept in the day, so it would be cool at night to travel with their kids and the dog and the cat. And then they got back on the road, headed for Kentucky. The credit card sales receipt for the Motel 6 in Paducah, Kentucky, shows CJ and his family checked in at 5:13 a.m. on June 30th, 2015. They were exhausted and everyone fell asleep. But Sergeant CJ found himself waking up in their Motel 6 bathroom holding a ballpoint pen in one hand and the letter-sized receipt from the motel in the other hand, staring at the back of the receipt covered with squares and lines, and could see his own pen trailing off to WTF. Is there anybody here who doesn't know what those letters stand for? During our first interview about this high strangeness, he asked that his voice be electronically altered because he is active Army and he wants to remain anonymous, but he's trying to keep me in his loop about what is happening even to this day. Sergeant CJ talks about a vivid dream he had before becoming conscious in the bathroom. In the dream, light gray alien beings wearing dark lenses over eyes very similar to but larger than human eyes are warning about a threat to Earth. Have you seen the symbols in sleep or in your mind's eye?
And that first time that it happened was in that hotel. I do not remember getting out of bed and walking into the bathroom with a pen in my hotel worksheet and doing that. I literally woke up standing there after I had finished.
Have the symbols been repeated in addition to the squares and the vertical lines?
Yeah, this dream.
Can you describe that dream?
And they're being scrolled past from right to left. They're slightly illuminated, like a light blue color.
Are you getting any impression of what they are saying in your dream?
In Council of 5, I believe.
Council of 5, and what are they saying?
Warning and preparation for something, an alert of what may come, or what could come, or what is soon to come, or things to that effect. And they're doing what they can to try to help us. They're almost to the point where they're outnumbered, and we're going to need to adjust and get to where we need to be sooner in order to be able to stand again.
Did you see any humanoids of any shape or size or type in any of your dreams? Which type?
In similar to ours, however, grayish in color, elongated heads, larger sockets for eyes, larger eyes. In the dream that I was seeing, there was one about where my feet would be, and I could see expressions on his face as a little bit of worry, but was trying to keep me calm.
Did you get the telepathic impressions of warning there aren't enough of us, there's more of them, something is going to happen that's going to be a big problem, and that these beings have been trying to help and now they can't because they don't have enough numbers versus what is there?
Similar, but I think it's more along the lines of what we're doing that's going to harm us, such as sending signals out to space is not a safe thing to do, that we have technology that we need to expand on, but it's being kept from everyone behind locked doors or closed doors, and only to certain individuals or something to that effect, and allow all minds to come together to get things done a little bit quicker.
Or what is going to happen?
It might negatively affect us. I don't know what that might be, though.
And if there is a warning or an alert, that would imply that something is coming that may be harmful.
Something that will affect us here on Earth. I know that at our current advancement in technology and how we're progressing is happening too slow. And the way to fix that is opening up and allowing everyone here who is kept in the dark or not being told the information. We need to allow outside minds in order to solve the issues that we're having, to increase our advancement in technology and speed up our process for advancement
If that doesn't happen, what bad could happen?
I,
But you just heard about a warning that seems dependent upon waking up the human family on this planet as a move that could help all of us get stronger. The awakening is happening, whether it is small in the minds of somebody like Sergeant CJ or large like we're experiencing together in Manchester, that something is impending that he puts in the dangerous category. Now, about this Council of Five, Sergeant CJ told me he had never heard those words outside of that dream. When you Google ET or Alien Council of Five, and the first time I ever heard it or did it was after the interview with him, this is one of the websites that comes up that lists 5 alleged alien races that include EMERTHER, apparently pronounced Emerther. The website Alien Axioms describes the Emerther as, quote, one of the founder races of the Council of Five, ancient and more advanced on many levels than most cosmic intelligences. Allegedly, it was the Emerther that wanted to meet with, or did meet, American President Dwight Eisenhower, perhaps over stopping atomic bomb testing, close quote. The website states, without giving information sources, quote, very little is known about the 5 alien races that make up the Council of Five. These 5 races have been protecting Earth and humans for a long time, and they last met together on this planet in 1944. That would be the year before the end of World War II, but during the height of World War II. I asked Sergeant CJ why he thought advanced intelligences would be communicating with Earth humans in binary code. And he replied, quote, well, maybe it's like the yin and yang symbol of black and white. So zeros and ones can be used all over the universe to communicate, close quote. Well, on Earth, this is what standard ASCII 8-bit binary code looks like. It starts with the number 0. It's up in the upper left, 0011, 0000. That is the binary code for the number 0. Capital letters are different from lowercase letters. Punctuation, such as periods and commas, each have their own 8-bit code designators. Australian geneticist Horace Drew, PhD, volunteered to translate Sergeant CJ's squares and ones. And here is the first page showing how red underlined letters and words emerge in ASCII binary code. And I don't think that a lot of you, I'm going to show a larger, but so that you will relate to the summary. That first red line, it says continuous, PROTE. Those letters match the binary code above. The next 2 lines of code they finish up PROTE to CTION of HUMANIT. That word finishes up down to Y and a latitude, longitude. Expose, hidden, KN, drops down to finish up knowledge to all. And now here is what the whole translation looks like. Continuous protection of humanity, 49.27 north, 11.5 east, expose hidden knowledge to all citizens, advancement imperative for planetary survival, beware of Orion 1350.3, and Z Reticuli 39.1 ? 70, avoid signal messages sent. Now, Horace Drew in Sydney, Australia, said about beware of Orion numbers, quote, the two coded numbers 1350.3 and 39.1 ? 70. They relate, he thinks, to the distance in light years from Earth to the Orion Nebula, which is, this is an astronomical fact, 1,350 light years from Earth. The binary star system of Zeta Reticuli is 39.17 light years from Earth. Zeta Reticuli 1 is supposed to be the original solar system source of some of the gray aliens, close quote. Now, that last line seems to relate to Sergeant CJ's dream information about the danger of Earth sending out SETI signals without knowing who is on the other end. That same warning came in 2015 from Elon Musk, Bill Gates, and physicist Stephen Hawking about don't send radio signals out from Earth that might be intercepted by something hostile out there. Now let's go back to that first line that says continuous protection of humanity, 49 degrees, 27 minutes north, and 11 degrees, 5 minutes east. If that latitude and longitude are supposed to be a location on Earth where ETs from the Council of Five are supposed to be protecting humans, how odd that it turns out to be town center of Nuremberg, Germany. Nuremberg was a significant city for the Nazis in World War II, and it was the location of the international war crime trials after the war ended. But Nuremberg was also famous more than 400 years ago in 1561, when immense black cylinders appeared in an early dawn sky and released many strange blue, black, red, and orange spheres, rods, and crosses. Many people watched the aerial machines clash in battle.
Part 3 of Linda's lecture comes to end, and many of you, like myself, found it fascinating to learn of the encounter on April 14th, 1561. Hans Wolf Glaser, born in 1500 and passed away in 1573. Glaser is most known for printing a broadsheet news article on the 14th of April, 1561, describing a mass sighting of a celestial event or unidentified flying objects that occurred over Nuremberg on the 4th of April the same year. The broadsheet, illustrated with a woodcut and text, is preserved at the Zentralbibliothek Zurich in Zurich, Switzerland. It describes objects of various shapes, including crosses, spears, discs, a crescent, and a tubular object from which several smaller, round objects emerged and darted around the sky at dawn. I present you with a short clip of experts covering this extraordinary historical event.
Nuremberg, Holy Roman Empire, is the dawn on the 14th of April 1561. It looks like a normal day, but between 4 and 5 a.m. something unexplainable happened. The sky was filled by a series of mysterious objects. The event is described in detail by Hans Glaser in a print kept in the Zurich Central Library. At first, there appeared in the middle of the sun two blood-red semicircular arcs, just like the moon in its last quarter, and in the sun, above and below on both sides, the color was blood. There stood a round ball of partly dull, partly black ferrous color. Likewise, there stood on both sides, and as torus about the sun, such blood-red ones and other balls in large number, about 3 in a line and 4 in a square, also some alone. In between these globes there were visible a few blood-red crosses, between which there were blood-red strips,
becoming thicker to the rear, and in the front malleable like the rods of reed grass, which were intermingled, among them 2 big rods, one on the right, the other to the left, and within the small and big rods there were 3, also 4 and more globes. The description seems to be partly similar to what happens during a parhelion, also known as sundog, caused by the refraction of light from small ice crystals in the air. In fact, the semicircular arcs that look like a moon and the cross can be found in another print from the Nuremberg Chronicles. However, this does not explain the presence of the orbs, and is the second part of the description the most interesting one. These all started to fight among themselves, so that the globes, which were first in the sun, flew out to the ones standing on both sides. Thereafter, the globes standing outside the sun, in the small and large rods, flew into the sun. Besides, the globes flew back and forth among themselves, and fought vehemently with each other for over an hour. And when the conflict in and again out of the sun was most intense, they became fatigued to such an extent that they all, as said above, fell from the sun down upon the earth, as if they all burned, and they then wasted away on the earth with immense smoke. After all this, there was something like a black spear, very long and thick-sided. The shaft pointed to the east. The point pointed west. Whatever such signs mean, God alone knows. Very similar phenomenon happened just 5 years later in Basel, Switzerland. The event was so unusual that it was featured in the local journal, and the Battle of the Spears is shown in this print of Samuel Koch, very similar to what happened a few years earlier in Nuremberg. In 1958, the psychiatrist Carl Gustav Jung talked about the Nuremberg and Basel episodes in his work, A Modern Myth of Things Seen in the Skies. Jung considered such events as natural phenomena, reinterpreted with religious or military meaning. Many pseudo-scientific theories consider the 2 events as UFO sightings, with battles among flying objects that ended with the crash of the spaceships.
We're about to start part 4 to learn more about the codes sent in some of the most documented UFO cases in history. What if hidden within the digital fabric of our world, embedded in something as seemingly mundane as ASCII code, lies a dire warning about humanity's future? Linda has been presented with startling information from high-ranking military insiders, cryptic messages encoded in the very language of computers, suggesting that Earth is for certain being monitored, and that we may be in grave danger. Are these transmissions a form of extraterrestrial disclosure, or a desperate attempt to prepare us for an unseen threat lurking beyond the stars? In this detailed 4th installment, we delve deeper into the mysteries of the ASCII revelations, and what they could mean for every citizen of Earth. If you're like me, and find UFO phenomena interesting, I invite you to subscribe to my channel, where we cover some of the most historical cases documented. Thank you for watching The Storyist.
A great black spear that remained stationary for an hour-long conflict. Some UFOs crashed and burned, as you can see in the lower right of this famous woodcut by German artist Hans Glaser. So who in that aerial UFO battle might have been protecting humanity, as stated in the Sergeant CJ binary code, quote, continuous protection of humanity, continuous for hundreds of years, thousands of years, millions of years. David Wilcock and Corey Good now say that they have information that there have been large monument, pyramid building, other intelligences on this planet, on the moon, throughout this solar system, throughout the Milky Way galaxy for 500 million years. That's 500 million. Where did they go? Now, what could the battle be about? Let's go deeper into binary code messages by comparing Sergeant CJ's string of zeros and ones to Sergeant Jim Peniston's back on December 26, 1980. That was the night that Sergeant Peniston, with Airman First Class John Burroughs and Airman Ed Kavansak, were ordered into Rendlesham Forest to investigate strange colored lights moving around in the tall forest. It was on civilian land that ran along RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge, and then, at that time, that was NATO's largest airbase. This is page 1 of the binary code written down by Sergeant Peniston after he touched the raised symbols on the surface of a mysterious black, glassy triangular craft on the forest ground. The red lines mark off the groups of 8 zeros and 1s to match against that ASCII code that I showed you that would translate for letters and numbers and caps and lowercase and punctuation. At the right is the summary translation beginning with exploration of humanity, a series of binary numbers. Then it says, this was the original translation, 3 times, 333 or 666, and then the number 8100. This is page 2 of Peniston's binary code that translates into that latitude and longitude, which turns out to be Nuremberg, Germany. And the all-capped word continuous for planetary advance. 4th coordinate, continuous, question mark, all caps CEPR, question mark, before. And after the word before on page 5, Peniston's writing trails off, stopping. After those first 5 pages of code were translated, Peniston then released one more batch of zeros and ones. This is Peniston's personally approved and official release of his binary code translations, in which he added 6 more latitudes and longitudes that, depending on the decimal point placement, which is totally interpretive, these sites could be Caracol, Belize, Sedona, Arizona, the Great Pyramid in Giza, Egypt, the Nazca Lines in Peru, Taishanku in China, and the portal at the Temple of Apollo in Naxos, Greece. And then these strange words, quote, eyes of your eyes. And in the last line, the number 8100 is repeated as, all caps, origin year 8100. If you subtract Earth year 1980 from 8100, you get 6,120 years in the future for the time travelers instead of 40,000 years as Peniston thought after his hypnosis. But it can also be argued that the time travelers from a distant future were not referring to Earth-based 365-day year cycles of time. It is also important to understand that Peniston did not have any decimal placements in his string of zeros and ones. So each latitude and longitude could be any one of 24 possibilities, according to retired astronomer Mike Reed. For example, in the second line, latitude and longitude, when a decimal was tried in a different position than the high Brazil option shown here, it precisely matched right down to like a square foot, the town center of Woodbridge, not far from the air base and Rendlesham Forest. Professor Reed felt strongly the Woodbridge option made more sense because the black triangle craft would likely be emitting a continuous stream of location information to whoever sent it to Rendlesham Forest. All of the name locations in parentheses are arbitrarily selected decimal point placements as well, but were more logical choices than other latitude, longitude possibilities that were out in the oceans in the middle of water, except for the selection of High Brazil, which came from an ancient sea story about an island west of Ireland that only appeared once every 7 years. Adding to its mystery were the tales of people who actually went out in boats trying to reach the island and who never could. And the Ancient Aliens TV program chose that option because that fit the Ancient Aliens theme, and that's why it's on the list instead of Woodbridge Town Center. Okay, now let's compare Sergeant CJ's first June 30th, 2016 binary translation on the top, 35 years after Sergeant Peniston's first binary release from his December 26, 1980 encounter. Words that stand out as similar over those 35 years and two different binary experiences are continuous, humanity, and advanced planetary survival. Another such warning about planetary survival came in this binary code discovered in a wheat field next to Crabwood Copse in the village of Pitt, near Winchester, Hampshire, England, on August 15, 2002. The gray alien head and binary code disk are in front of BBC Winchester's tall broadcast antenna. The 60 thin horizontal lines are thought to simulate an early 20th century TV broadcast. That's when they had all of these lines in the TV sets. The implication seemed to be that the crop formation was a reply to Earth TV signals. But was the warning from the alien depicted in the wheat holding the binary disk? Or was the warning about the alien in the wheat pattern? The three star-like objects on the alien's shoulder resemble the famous Orion belt stars, so many people have thought that there is a threat from something associated with the Orion constellation. The start of the Crabwood August 15, 2002 binary spiral of code begins, and you see part of it, the black 0010, and that is the beginning. You can see capital B over here from the ANSCII 8-bit, 01, 00, and B, and the 0100 is going from bottom to top around in a spiral. That's where the capital B comes in. And then the rest of the message, which is in standing crop and laid crop, the standing crop would be the ones, the flat crop would be the zeros, and you get BEWARE. And a lot more. The entire ASCII 8-bit translation of the Crabwood spiral binary code is, quote, beware the bearers of false gifts and their broken promises. Much pain, but still time. Believe there is good out there. We oppose deception. Conduit closing, close quote. A similar message was repeated 13 years later on June 23, 2015, near the airport of Turin, Italy, also known as Torino. This city is where Jesus Christ's alleged burial shroud is kept. Geneticist Horace Drew, PhD, from Sydney, Australia, tackled these very difficult rings of binary code that included 128 small circles in straight lines between 16 triangular rays of the outermost ring. His binary translation of that outer ring is Timeo et ferentes, or beware et bearing gifts. Dr. Drew said the Torino, Italy, June 23, 2015 summer solstice wheat pattern, quote, it looks like a clock, but we have to rotate the inner wheel to match the outer wheel, close quote. And even though the inner ring binary code is not clear, Dr. Drew thinks some of it warns about a Trojan horse event coming to Earth. He wonders if the Trojan horse is an invasion attack by gray ETs from Orion and Zeta Reticuli, warned about by the Emerthers in Sergeant CJ's binary code. And that came only 7 days later, on June 30th, 2015, in Wadley, Georgia. So you have the event in Torino, Italy on June 23rd, and then you have the encounter with the 820-foot wide disc and the zeros and ones on the back of the receipt from the hotel 7 days later in Georgia, June 30th, 2015. Sergeant CJ did receive more telepathic downloads coming into his head at night. He said the squares and lines came faster than before, so it was hard for him to write it all down. He also could see that some of the squares were darkened, and he managed to get some of the new communication written down along with his comments about what was happening. From November 20th to the first week of January 2016, Sergeant CJ was waking up a lot yelling. I talked with his wife, and she said he woke her up talking loudly and was often saying a string of zeros and ones. It scared her. Through tears, she told me how much it scared her and she wanted it to stop. Sergeant CJ said he was trying to concentrate on the dark shadings in the squares that he hadn't been able to copy before because the images moved too fast in his mind's eye, but finally he thought he was getting some of it in these new pages. It is interesting that both Sergeant CJ and Sergeant Jim Peniston, 1980 and 2015, they both describe seeing the zeros and ones coming from the right side of their mind's eye, coming across in a stream right to left, and that Peniston said he never could get them out of his head. They just kept rolling till he sat down and wrote them all down. Sergeant CJ says that they will come across, and he is aware that they're there, and they're not holding in his mind. It is as if they keep repeating in some, so that he can get up and write down in a notebook, which he keeps, trying to copy as they move right to left in his mind's eye. Dr. Drew researched binary codes and found this one at thinkersmith.org that uses squares that are either clear or blackened to represent ones and zeros, very similar to what CJ was using, but Sergeant CJ had no use for and had never used binary code before this experience began. Horace Drew applied it to Sergeant CJ's new pages. On the far left of this graphic, Dr. Drew's binary translations are in those red letters going vertically down next to each of the letters that they represent. And that left word is imminent, and then code for space. And this is what is there. Imminent threat soon upon Earth's leaders and civilizations. Expose and disband hidden knowledge to all citizens. Employ safe and controlled joint study to all minds. Progression imperative for combined survival. Embrace this space vessel threat, and the rest of this makes no sense to any of us. 000 journey 12 in brackets, LY should be light year, so we assume it's 12 light years. Ikes, we assume that's President Eisenhower. Embedded, citizens are ready. AIS, CLOSE, evolve, close to evolve, and then 6 ones. Then Royal Emerther, that word is there. I can testify Sergeant CJ knows nothing, has never studied, doesn't know anything about UFO literature, nothing. This has all caught him totally off guard. And yet here is this word that none of us knew about until this occurred. And then we look up on the web, and here is this royal emerther warning, expose foreign technology to all. Like Corso, evolutionary advancement needed to prevent takeover. Bracket, the number 3, a quote mark inside of the brackets. In the last paragraph, the ET-related emerther goes back to that reference to the Council of Five that existed on the web long before he ever had this experience, and he was trying to recall what they had downloaded in the dream, and he remembered that the beings in front of him referenced something about a Council of Five. Then on February 18, 2016, he found that he had added 5 new lines of squares and lines without darkening any of them. And he emailed me, quote, "This was fast, and I was unsure if I drew them down correctly. It felt like it was not meant for me to write them, and I felt weird about it, like it was not clear enough for me to do this. I just did the best I could, and I figured it was probably all messed up or wrong. They are the only ones I have had since I sent you the photos of my notebook. I could not darken the boxes and lines because they were moving too fast, and I was having a hard time concentrating. There was much more to this, but I could not keep up concentrating," close quote. Well, I sent these to Dr. Drew, and what he sent back was a surprise. There were 5 clumps of letters in 5 unknown words. Dr. Drew did know that the last 2 letters, Ki, has originally in Sumerian, ancient Sumerian, referred to the earth. Napku Rakbu Hlarak Sanuki. So I sent the 5 words to Professor Joshua Jeffers, PhD, Research Specialist, Royal Inscriptions of the Neo-Assyrian Period Project, University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology, Babylonian Section in Philadelphia, and here is his March 24th, 2016 reply. This is 1 year ago. Quote, "The first 2 words and the 4th word look to be Akkadian and not Sumerian. The first could be the god Nabu, but without the cuneiform, it is difficult to say since there is no divine classifier before it here," close quote. Now, Nabu is one of the 3 most important gods in Sumeria. Nabu was the keeper of the tablets of destiny that recorded humanity's fate. The only 2 others that had more authority.
This is the end of part 4, and I really hope you return for part 5. Before you go, I wanted to bring up the most recent public case of UFO phenomenon, unlike any other we've seen, which happened only 2 years ago. On April 30th, 2023, a 911 call was placed by a 16-year-old boy named Angel, claiming to have non-human beings in his backyard after something had crashed in his backyard. A deputy in the area caught footage of a bright light on his body cam and responded to the call, and then proceeded with the interview of the boy and his family. This news report you're about to see is from Channel 8 News in Las Vegas, where UFO journalist George Knapp works, and performed a follow-up on the case. As you review the footage, keep in mind, all claims of the case have been proven true, expressed by Mr. Knapp in his follow-up on it, including the law enforcement involved in the incident. This video, according to YouTube, is posted 1 year ago, and this timeline will come into play as we look deeper into this story, after you review this footage carefully.
It was the streak seen across the sky, now seen around the world. This as our 8 News Now investigators confirm Metro actually set up cameras at this home where a family called 911 claiming to see aliens in their backyard. And tonight, a fierce debate is underway about the legitimacy of an alleged UFO crash. Good evening, I'm Janice Valdez.
And I'm Brian Loftus. Our 8 News Now investigators reporting about terrified members of a local family who told police they had aliens in their backyard. Chief Investigator George Knapp here to piece it all together.
You know, as with all things UFO, the public debate is ferocious and ongoing. Was it all a hoax? Were we duped? Was it all an evil plot, a cover-up, all of the above? We took another look at the hubbub to separate wheat from chaff. The fireball captured on a police body cam on the night of April 30th was real. The American Meteor Society says witnesses reported seeing it all across the West, from northeastern Utah to Southern California. Another Las Vegas resident sent us a video of the same object recorded on her home camera.
Investigation by Nexstar station KLAS.
As the story of the Las Vegas incident spread across newscasts and social media, one of NASA's planetary defense officers weighed in to say it was likely a small meteor that fell to Earth hundreds of miles away from Las Vegas. Police videos obtained by 8 News Now indicate Metro officers were among the witnesses.
One of my partners said they saw something fall out of the sky too, so that's why I'm kind of curious.
The appearance of the meteor seemingly triggered the events that followed. A frightened family called 911 and told police they had 10-foot-tall alien beings in their backyard. Officers responded to the home minutes later, interviewed the witnesses, canvassed the area, and cautiously inspected the backyard to look for intruders. One thing noticed by the officers was a circle in the soil. In conversations with us and in a podcast interview, Angel, the main witness, suggested the circle might have been created when an unknown object landed in the yard. Social media sleuths have since pointed out that the circular image has been viewable via Google Earth for more than a year. The family told us by phone they had seen suspicious vehicles with men in black types checking out their home. Turns out there is substance to that. A retired police officer fessed up on News Nation that he spent days staking out the house to see what, if anything, unfolded. What about those reports that Metro installed a special surveillance camera atop the house, presumably to watch for intruders, human or otherwise, or overzealous media? Turns out that's true as well. Metro confirmed as much in a statement to 8 News Now's David Charnes. The system stayed on the roof for days. What about the Ring camera video with the weird noise? The main witness, Angel, intimated to us the video was recorded by one of his neighbors, and the audio was from the April 30th UFO crash. It wasn't. The security camera video was recorded in mid-April, according to the man who first posted the clip. He doesn't want his name used, but says the recording was from a fireball that passed over his home in the southwestern part of the valley 2 weeks prior to the alleged alien encounter. The family declined to be interviewed by us, but members have spoken elsewhere and stick to their claims of seeing aliens in the backyard. Dozens of people on social media have analyzed and dissected the images with various claims of aliens spotted in the shadows. Police do not believe this was a hoax call, which could be a crime if done intentionally. In the fervid swamp known as UFO world, our coverage of the story was itself seen as a dastardly plot to distract attention away from a prominent whistleblower named David Grush, who stepped forward around the same time. Grush unveiled his explosive on-camera account on News Nation, which is owned by the parent company of KLAS. In spite of the local news story, Grush's story was reported by news media all over the world. Curses foiled again.
All right. So what do you make of this whistleblower, David Grush?
He first reached out to me about a year ago. We've been in contact ever since. He's the real deal. I mean, he had a distinguished career in the Air Force. Then he went to work for a 3-letter agency you probably haven't heard of, the NGA, which basically tracks everything in space, in the air, in the ocean, under the ocean, on land. They keep track of everything. He has the highest security clearances in our government, and in that capacity, he interacted with something like 2,000 SAP, special access programs, and he learned along the way that we're reverse engineering crash flying saucers, and he's been telling that to Congress under oath behind closed doors, and I think they'll probably bring him back. So it's a pretty intriguing story. A lot like what we've been hearing about out in the Nevada desert for a long time.
Right.
Of all the stories you've done over decades and decades, this one has really gone worldwide.
The backyard alien?
Yes.
Oh, it's crazy. It's crazy how much email we get, you know. We're not done with it. We'll see where it goes.
I was going to say, this is not the last of that story.
No.
All right, George, thanks for that. Now,
I want you to pay very close attention to George explaining the boy named Angel refused to be interviewed by him. And yet the second piece of new news footage I present to you here from News Nation covered them performing a follow-up on the boy's story, which now involves paranormal incidents taking place in the home. Interesting enough, this video was posted 11 months ago. One can't help but wonder why the boy would refuse to speak with George Knapp and accept an interview with a reporter, much less famous, detailing these phenomena within the same year time frame, especially with new paranormal incidents happening in the home.
Alex, good to see you. I have to ask you, what are you making? Because there's something really interesting about this. And it's that last night it was reported there was more strange activity in and around the home. What is going on here?
Right. The story goes that just about a year ago, the Kenmore family saw these mysterious, unidentifiable creatures in their backyard right here behind me, right? They said that they were 10-foot tall creatures, that they were standing there looking at them. They could see them breathing. Angel says that he was actually growling at him, freaking them out so much that they actually called 911. Well, it turns out that these unidentified, unexplainable phenomenon didn't just stop at that night. Angel went into great detail with me during our one-on-one conversation about other paranormal activity that's been happening, but this time inside of their house. It goes beyond just seeing shadows and hearing whispers. These are really freaky things that he told me during our exclusive conversation. Take a listen. You mentioned paranormal activity. What exactly did you see?
Well, I was in another room. My brother called me, and there was a upside-down cross, and there was a Jesus statue in it. They ripped Jesus out of it, they threw him like across the room, and it was floating upside down.
Are you saying floating in the air?
Yeah, like in the air. It was floating upside down.
What did you do? I mean, did you go and pick it up? Did you knock it down? Like how?
No, I didn't do nothing. I was just sitting there. I was crazy. I was like, what?
But how did it come down? It's not still floating right now, is it?
No, it came down. So we got closer to it and then just dropped.
It fell to the ground. A crucifix.
Yeah.
Floating in the air, upside down. The Jesus on the crucifix had been ripped off.
Yeah.
And it was floating.
Yep.
And you can say definitively, without lies, that that is what you saw.
Yes. Swear to God, that's what I saw.
Okay, and what about the Bible? What did you tell me about the Bible?
Oh yeah, the Bible. So I was chilling normal. There was just a Bible just going like this, flipping the pages. But it was like steady, like it wasn't because of the air. It was steady, like somebody was holding it. As soon as I got close to it, it dropped again. It just dropped again.
This is inside your house, not outdoors. No,
No,
wind,
this is inside, yeah.
No wind factor, but the page is steadily turning on a Bible.
Yeah.
And you have the same justification for that as well, demonic presence?
Yeah, I can see demonic presence, yeah.
The pages of the Bible were moving on their own, and an actual crucifix hanging upside down?
Yeah. So, you know, we had a couple priests come over to the house, pray over the house, and everything seems to be normal again.
Are you connecting all these things together, everything you saw in your backyard, to the things you've experienced over these past few months?
Yeah, to be honest, yeah, I think so. I still don't have an explanation of what it is, you know, still pretty weird, and I have no clue what it is.
What did the priests say when they actually came to your house?
They're saying that it might be fallen angels, like demons or fallen angels, something like that.
Fallen angels inside your home.
Yeah, that was pretty creepy.
How does it make you feel about living here still?
Right now I feel good, you know. There's a lot of time priests came over, but yeah, but you know, whatever happened on last year May, that was pretty scary, man. I was pretty traumatized and stuff like that.
What does that look like to you? You said you're traumatized. I don't want to make you relive it.
Yeah.
What is that like?
It's pretty bad, man. You can't sleep, you know. Not to sound like a crybaby, but you know, you cry most of the time when you think about it. You get flashbacks. You know, not a good experience.
With all of the paranormal activity happening inside your house, are you thinking about moving away?
Oh yeah, soon I'm gonna move away from this house. Yeah.
Everybody, or just you?
Everybody, I think.
You guys are done with this place?
Yeah.
What do you say to the people who believe that your family just made this whole thing up to try to get attention?
they could believe whatever they want, you know. I'm not doing it for free. If I did it for fame, I would be on YouTube and stuff like that, doing more videos, but I don't care, guys. I just went on TikTok and YouTube, made my story.
And while we certainly have Angel's story to go off of, other people here in this neighborhood have also filled in some of the gaps and some of the things that they found freaky about that night that those two unidentified beings were seen by the Kenmore family in their backyard. For example, a guy who lives just right down the street just saw us out here on the side of the road and began talking to us, and he remembered that night as well. He said that for some bizarre reason, his TV all of a sudden stopped working at that time, that his surveillance cameras no longer were working, his lights were shutting off. So put all of this together, the Kenmore sighting, what the neighbors are reporting, not to mention what those Las Vegas police officers saw on those body-worn cameras, that flash of light streak across the sky 39 minutes before that 911 call. It really is an unexplainable phenomenon happening here in Las Vegas.
It's also extremely interesting to point out none of the police that were there on the night of the investigation were ever interviewed after the incident. Mr. Knapp brought up David Grush's coming forward, who was a person who worked for the government, stole Angel's local stories thunder. A question does come up, though, that really has to be addressed. If this incident took place in Las Vegas, the home of George Knapp, then why didn't he cover the story directly the day after the incident? It was quite literally in his backyard, and I'm sure the network would have loved to have the breaking news. Another observation to think about carefully with this case. A government agent comes forward within the same time period. This local story took place as a whistleblower, who just happens to have the highest security clearance achievable in the government's Black Ops program, claimed by a person in the media. I suppose we should just believe him, shouldn't we? Thank you for returning for part 5 of Linda's lecture. The small clip you just reviewed is new footage of the UFO crash that happened on May 1st, 2023, from a different angle. If you're just joining us, the clip you just saw complements the discussion at the end of part 4 of Linda's lecture. Please go back and review it if you haven't seen it already. Scott Roeder, a testified crime scene analyst, decided to review the footage of Angel and his family going into their backyard when they heard the crash to investigate what happened. What he then reported to Newsmax using the latest analyst software in the clip you're about to review was nothing short of extraordinary. If you're like me and must know the truth about the alien UFO phenomena, I invite you to subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching The Storyist.
We can take a video and look at whether or not there is an artificial artifact added to it or not. And in this case, we can definitively say, to a degree of scientific certainty, that this entity, this thing in the video, is there in the physical reality in which the Kenmore family is also there. Like, this is so critical because you can clearly see through the slots in the fence that there is a leg motion moving from the right to the left side of the screen. And clearly it is behind there. So this isn't just like a head floating in space. This is a head of that is somehow that does not have full opacity, that the opacity of the head of the shadow is only at about 33% opacity versus a normal shadow, which would be at 100% opacity, or an object in the screen, which is at 100%. And this isn't anything that you did. It's just what you were able to determine, that this shadow being, or this being in the shadows, possibly creating its own shadow or smoky filter or cloaking technique, is not only cloaking itself from the people there, but cloaking itself from the camera itself, in that it's minimizing our ability to identify pixels inside of that shadow.
Nabu were Enlil and Enki. Nabu was son of Marduk and grandson of Enki, Ea of the Anunnaki. Nabu's grandfather, Ea, is the creator and protector of humanity because Ea created humans out of clay to be worker slaves for the Mesopotamian so-called gods. But the supreme god, Enlil, was irritated by the noise that humans made, apparently because we aren't telepathic and we have to talk out loud. So Enlil wanted to destroy Ea's human slave creation with a devastating flood because we were too noisy. But Ea realized what Enlil was up to and got a friend to build an ark so that humanity could escape God Enlil's act of annihilation. Professor Jeffers continues, the second word, rakbu, would be the noun rider, from the verb rakabu, to ride, frequently upon a horse or a chariot. The middle word could possibly be the word for the city of Larsa in southern Mesopotamia, written out phonetically, but the H hyphen is nonsensical for Sumerian and Akkadian, and this is puzzling. The fourth word, sanu, could be an infinitive of the verb to do again, or a second time, or even to be different and strange. The fifth word, ki, by itself can be Sumerian, and it would mean earth or land. Now, the meaning exactly remains unclear, but Sergeant CJ himself wonders if this is about the return of Nabu to Earth. We are waiting to see if he has any more telepathic downloads that might explain these Sumerian and Akkadian words, and just recently we got a little bit, and all I'll do is just tell you. These were 0 and 1 translations on September 29th, October 3rd, October 9th, October 20th. These were just snatches he was able to write down. And here were the translations. Day of dark energy, until photon energy is mastered, enlarge. Photon energy is mastered. Squeeze, shrink, insert, charge, creator. Will stand aside, 14 guardians remain on. So it's less coherent, strange, and stranger. But here is one more look at everything that we've been able to translate outside of these bits that I just told you, from binary transmission, from this alien intelligence to Sergeant CJ, who has a very responsible job in the United States Army. June 30th, 2015, continuous protection of humanity, 49.27 north, 11.5 east, expose hidden knowledge to all citizens, advancement imperative for planetary survival. Beware of Orion 1350.3 and Z Reticuli 39.170. Avoid signal messages sent. October 2015 to January 2016. Imminent threat soon upon Earth's leaders and civilizations. Expose and disband hidden knowledge to all citizens. Employ safe and controlled joint study to all minds. Progression imperative for combined survival. Embrace this space vessel threat, the strange 12 light years. Ike's embedded citizens are ready, and more that don't make any sense. Royal Emerther warning, expose foreign technology to all. Evolutionary advancement needed to prevent takeover. Time machines, alien life trying to survive in interplanetary genetic missions, ET hybrids and clones, eons beyond us, as the MJ-12 documents say. Whistleblowers have reported that alien technologies can make their various spacecraft, androids, and other ET technologies invisible to human eyes. They can be anywhere around us on this planet at any time, in the sky, in the water, on the land, and we cannot see. This naval ship fading into invisibility is an October 2015 Northrop Grumman Facebook posting. In addition to invisibility, the extraterrestrial technology is described as functioning with self-activating software that can neutralize gravity and project three-dimensional holograms as camouflage that human eyes and minds cannot detect in the Earth. The alien goal, they say, is to harvest genetic material from this planet's animal and human life in order to create a large ongoing supply that you're looking at of rapid cycle cloned and hybridized body containers with very advanced technology that some people in the human abduction syndrome refer to as the resurrection tubes. And I'd like to underscore how important these illustrations that I'm showing you are, because I was contacted by a man who had worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency for 23 years. He said his job was to analyze and monitor the competing geopolitical territorial conflict of three different extraterrestrial civilizations on this planet. And he said, we thought that the rapid cycle cloning technology was one of our government's greatest secrets. And then I get a call that you have 110 pages in your book, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2. And I got the book. And I'm looking at drawings of our secret. I'm looking at maps of our secret. I am reading about all of these details, and I had to meet and ask you questions because it was so compartmentalized. That truly happened. This is very, very important. I first learned about the cloning tube technology the first week of March 1991 when I received in the mail a large envelope that contained an audio cassette, a letter, and several color drawings from a woman named Linda Porter. She was born in 1946 and began having memorable experiences with non-humans by age 12 in 1958. She had decided it was important to reach me after hearing a conference presentation I had given in California concerning eyewitness testimony about non-human intelligences interacting with our planet. She was concerned about her vulnerability as a person caught up in the human abduction syndrome and was frightened about the United States government's policy of hiding the alien presence. She's another who thought everybody should know and it might make a difference in protecting us rather than hurting us. Her letter began, quote, "We abductees are caught in the middle of a series of ongoing events that will one day prove to be historically significant to the future of the Earth. Unfortunately, because of our continuing non-voluntary interactions with these beings, we have, in a sense, become victims of both sides of the phenomena. On the one hand, we are used by the aliens for their own purposes, whatever those purposes may be. On the other, if we speak out, we risk ridicule from the public and in some cases possible harassment and/or intimidation by government and military personnel. If you could look directly into these creatures' eyes, you'd realize that every detail of your life, no matter how personal, how mundane, how minute, is known to them. It makes me wonder, are we some sort of Ken and Barbie dolls being played with by an emotionally immature race of beings with no sense of morality? Or are we pawns held in the grasp of a dying race that will do anything for their own survival, including the cold-blooded manipulation of another species, we humans, and the brutal mutilation of helpless animals? Unless a person has been through the trauma of an abduction, they cannot comprehend how these entities can strip the mind and soul as easily as they can strip the clothes off a body. They scan details of a person's life with such facility that they make you feel as if you are an interesting piece of lint caught between their toes. In the blink of an eye, these beings devastate all personal freedom, all sense of privacy, and all prospects for living a normal existence. A person's life is never the same again. He or she is changed forever, close quote. Linda Porter's words speak for a lot of abductees who have interacted with grays, blondes, tall and short, reptilians, tall and short, insect humanoids, but some abductees think that they are friendly non-humans, which actually try to help people advance to more stability that will help the non-humans to survive as well. Linda Porter was the first of a half-dozen people in the human abduction syndrome that I've interviewed who experienced being raised and lowered in a tube of light and passing through walls that she and other abductees say feels like 1,000 little feathers all over their body. Linda said the light tube is different from the tunnels that opened up inside of her bedroom, quote, "The beam is used only to transfer people from Earth to a craft and back. The tunnel is a physical created hole from one dimension to another. Traveling through the tunnel was what made me ill, had something to do with the change in physical density of two differing dimensions." She told me in 1963, when she was 17 years old, that she was abducted from her Covina, California home by gray-colored beings with large eyes. These gray beings seem to be the extraterrestrial biological entities, or EBENs, that are described in leaked documents from our government as friendly and concerned about Earth and human evolution, although I can tell you that in 83 to 84, I received a card like a Christmas card, innocent and benign, it seemed, and inside were handwritten words. "The EBENs are our allies, ... but they lie." That's how schizophrenic all this is. Linda Porter was shown a procedure to transfer the soul or the life force from a dying man into a healthy younger clone of the man Linda could see in one of the cloning resurrection tubes. The gray being told Linda telepathically that the same soul transfer would be done with her. The gray explained to her that she had rheumatic fever as a teenager that damaged her heart. The gray non-human said it was vital that Linda Porter's soul entity continue in the same genetic body container she had been born with in order to accomplish an unknown alien agenda. Linda saw rise out of the top of the dead man's spine a golden yellow-orange light that elongated in the air as it came out of his back of his neck at the top of the spine, moved across the room to a row of body-sized tubes lighted from top and bottom and filled with a strange purple-looking gas. Inside the tube on the far right was a clone body of the same man, but about 10 years younger, she thought. Linda Porter said that there was a problem about Earth body containers, souls, other dimensions, and altered timelines. And she said, quote, "I was told that the resurrected cloned man would be relocated elsewhere, maybe Australia, and would continue on with his life, while the body that she saw die in the presence of the gray and a praying mantis would be allowed to die in his Midwestern town, and a funeral and a burial would take place. So in the United States, he would be a dead person. In Australia, he would be a clone, a rapid cycle clone, continuing to live a combination of that container and that soul for reasons known only to the non-humans. Linda thought it was vital to the Ebens that the man's soul continue functioning longer inside the same kind of container that his older sick body had been. And she thought that part of the reason that they take tissue samples from abductees when they are quite young is to have this tissue in reserve in case a new body for an abductee becomes necessary later on. She said, I got the impression the aliens do not like to do this soul transfer very often. Actually, I got the feeling the aliens are not supposed to be doing this at all, but they seem to be backed into a corner and have no other recourse. They also seem to be trying to hide all of this from some higher form of life, whatever the authority is that prohibits this soul transfer. Also prohibits the ETs from interfering on this planet, but they are interfering. I remember her saying that to me, but they are interfering. Whoever it is much higher evolved than they are and wields a great deal of power over many, many other realms of existence. There is much, much more to existence than we could ever begin to understand. Much of what we have been taught regarding the physical universe and the laws that govern it is wrong. The Eben doing the soul transfer from her diseased body to her new clone body in one of the lighted tubes gave Linda Porter an overview of how the cosmos is constructed from the Eben point of view. The universe is built on sound patterns, which is why so many different worlds, dimensions can exist in the same space. Each is on a different frequency. Disrupt a world dimension to the point that you destroy the carrier wave it exists on, and you have created a hole in existence that cannot support the dimension above or below it. Each frequency, besides maintaining its own world dimension, also supports or holds in place the one above it and below it. Everything is interdependent. There are countless world dimensions occupying the same space without being aware of one another because of having their own individual octaves. This octave frequency holds the world dimension in place and causes it to exist safely without interfering with or even being aware of other worlds around it. This frequency acts as a buffer zone to keep everything in its place. But you do anything to disrupt it, and you begin a collapse that starts a deadly chain reaction. If the density of this collapse reaches a certain weight, space-time itself begins to collapse. Atomic and hydrogen bombs physically tear into other dimensions. And whatever the experiment is that our government is involved with in outer space, whatever it is, we don't know. If successful, it will change the density of matter to such an extent that the chain reaction started will not be able to be stopped by anybody in any world dimension. There are literally hundreds of different alien life forms here trying to stop what is happening, as it is putting their own worlds at risk. Some, as I had mentioned in earlier letters, are not supposed to be interfering, but they are doing so anyway. What they are all trying to do is stop the ripple effect that will emanate outward from Earth should this government's experiment succeed. But with all their technology, why don't the aliens or their superiors just walk in and stop the whole thing themselves? Why do they need us abductees to speak for them? Something just does not make any sense. I wonder.
I want to bring someone else into our conversation, Ben, if I can. So stand by for a second. Mark Berry is a retired Las Vegas Metro Police officer who's also been working with Ben on investigating this case. So, Mark, you're the perfect person to ask about this piece that involves the so-called, Metro Vegas Police going to the house days after this crash. A couple of sergeants, couple of investigators, the family reports, and they didn't exist. The Metro Police are saying we didn't. Do we believe the Metro Police when they say they didn't? Or do we think that somebody did show up dressed as them?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Metro's a great organization. Their officers are some of the most finely trained officers in the world. And, they handled it, in my book, they pretty much did what they could as patrol officers. The fact that the family said some sergeants came in afterwards and put up cameras, that's not protocol in any kind of unit within the department. We're not going to do that. Basically, when you show up on scene, once you gain that real estate, you're not going to give it up. So if you need to call in criminalistics, if you need to call in detectives, if you need to call in another unit, you're going to do that, but you're going to remain on scene, probably, start a perimeter or something like that. These officers, I'm not going to discount the story. They had no reason not to believe, other than, it's pretty out there when you hear about the descriptions, but they're there to look and get to the bottom of it as fast as they can. And they did go out back. They did see some, I guess you could call it evidence, but, I also have dove into this a little bit besides talking to the officers involved. I used some of my air assets and were able to look out in the back of the yard and see the circular impressions that they were talking about. And in that backyard, there's a number of trailers, a number of flatbeds, and the circular impressions are very indicative of rear wheel tracking. So if you drive through a puddle, your front tires make a mark, your back tires are going to make another mark. So you're going to have two separate circles. And if you can see, it's the same depth and the same width of the other vehicle tracks that are going around that shed. So to me, it looks very indicative of a vehicle track, and those are back rear tracking.
Well, that would be a logical explanation for the naysayers to say there's always an explanation for this. So thank you for bringing that part up about those mysterious circles in the backyard. But Mark, you also spent some time staked out. Like, you staked out to see if you could get a read on this family. The family has ghosted everybody. They're not responding to interviewers that they made appointments with. They're not responding to telephone calls. I don't even know if they're in the house anymore. But what was your read when you were parked out front for hours and hours?
Yeah, so I'll admit, I drive a black SUV.
Okay, there you go. We can explain the black SUVs away now.
I do not wear black government-issued sunglasses, so there's a little difference there. I have talked to some of the neighbors. I have been able to confirm noise, the big giant boom that the...
Well, you made it through part 5, and I hope you're interested to see part 6. The clip you just saw is of Newsmax following up an investigation on Angel and his family after the UFO incident occurred. They are speaking with a retired Las Vegas detective, a Mark Berry. I have a logical question that one has to ask. Why would a detective, or for that matter a retired one, be staking out a home, and I quote the reporter again, for hours and hours, where a strange 911 call came from regarding a young man seeing non-human beings in his backyard? Wouldn't a retired detective or police officer of any kind be able to contact his sources at his old department that employed him to find out if the claims the family made were true? And I quote the reporter's own words. A couple of sergeants, a couple of investigators that supposedly went through the house after the night of the incident. This is certainly not the protocol of the police in any jurisdiction, and he went even further using the words. He used some of his inner assets to investigate the backyard circle. He stated he was then speaking with their neighbors. Once again, this is odd, as this would have taken place from non-retired law enforcement on scene the night of the incident. I'm sure you, like myself, would find it very disturbing to witness a black SUV parked outside your home. Most people would call what he described as stalking, unless the family gave him permission to be there performing an investigation. We'll now let him finish his clip. I look forward to seeing you at the release of part 6.
Main camera had caught one part of the valley, but there's some more issues with the backyard. Again, I don't want to discount what they're saying, but the house has been dark. There has been no movement in and out other than onlookers going, by the house real slow, taking pictures. As far as movement in the house itself or in the rear, the backyard, or even in the trailers, it's been dark. And it's been dark for the last few days. So I'm sure that they may have left town. But, I don't know. They may just be laying low.
And Mark, I'll tell you, there's a perfectly good explanation. They're freaking out over all this attention, and so they amscrade, or, as others would say, they've been taken by the government and they're being hidden away and interrogated. I mean, this is what the internet's lighting up about.
Yeah, the only hardcore thing is that there is an extremely classified document dealing with religion, and it's about that thick. Period. But why would there be any classified material dealing with religion?
I want to go back to the religion thing. I want you to say it.
It's so far out.
All right, your objection has been noted.
Okay.
What does it say?
That we're containers. That's how supposedly the aliens look at us. That we are nothing but containers.
Containers of? Containers.
Maybe containers of souls. You can come up with whatever theory you want, but we're containers, and that's how we're mentioned in the documents. That religion was specifically created, so we have some rules and regulations for the sole purpose of not damaging the containers.
You've made it to the 6th and final installment of the Linda Moulton Howe lecture. But before we proceed, ask yourself, how much of what you've heard is true? And how much was designed to keep us all in the dark? The clip you just witnessed was from Bob Lazar's chilling 1989 interview, where he revealed a classified document stack from his time working inside S4. He covered a document that claimed humans are mere containers for the soul, and that religion itself may have been engineered, not to save us, but to control us. As we dive into the rest of Linda's lecture, pay close attention. Do these stories reflect consistency? Or are we being led down a labyrinth of half-truths spread by self-proclaimed abductees? Some pieces fit while others defy explanation. If you're drawn to mysteries like this, join us at the Storyist, where we don't just tell stories, we hunt the truth lurking behind them.
If we humans are being lied to, used for some purpose to put over the idea the aliens want us to believe, if there is an experiment, maybe if it succeeds, it will put us in competition with the aliens for something they don't want to share. Maybe they are trying to scare us out of their neighborhood, close quote. So now I'm going to just summarize that up to this point where I'm going to start again, that I was sharing that I have talked with a lot of whistleblowers in various states of knowledge in, we'll say, CIA backgrounds, DIA backgrounds, and they have basically reinforced something that at this point in this presentation you are probably feeling. That is the frustration, the angst of not knowing what the truth is, of not knowing what the true agendas are, of intelligences that have been defined in documents since 1947 as being eons, thousands of years beyond us. And that the implication is something is trying to help us while we are also being manipulated. And that my own personal opinion is there's only one way to free us, and that is we need to have the truth. We need to have the truth about even the most difficult subjects. which include a slide like this one and the whole issue of the recycling of souls in and out of body containers. There was an interview with one of the live aliens at Los Alamos. I know this for a fact. I've talked with a man who was there. And when the Eben was asked about the term, the word reincarnation, the Eben answered, reincarnation, the recycling of souls, is the machinery of this universe. And I ask, did he say anything about the devil, Christ, God? And the answer that I was given was, quote, there is an evil force. Even the Ebens talk about it. There is a supreme being, and then there is the evil one, the evil entity. The Ebens are as scared of that evil entity as we are of the devil. Sherman said, I don't know where the devil is, but what worries me is that if the Ebens are scared of him, I'm damn scared of him, because the Ebens can control everything. They have been around this universe and done everything. And if they believe in the same supreme being that we call God, and they say there is an evil one, then there really is a devil. And I ask, would the devil be equal to and opposite of the positive God? Are there two gods? Sherman answered, I don't know. You can think about that forever. There's another thing that puzzles me. The Ebens say that everything that occurs in our time span has occurred before. I guess it means we're just right in the middle of a huge big circle, and it just goes round and round again. And the way I see this is that the earth was created, and one day, 5 billion years from now, the sun is going to expand, and earth will be engulfed and destroyed, and everything goes back into a big bang, and then everything starts all over again. I ask, when the Yellow Book talked about the supreme being that created the universe, did it say anything about parallel dimensions, parallel timelines? Sherman said, nothing. The aliens talked about the vastness of the universe, that there are life forms everywhere. It talks about a supreme being creating the souls and creating the containers and distributing the souls to the containers and to the Ebens. That is just basic fact. If the Ebens made us and put us here, there has to be a reason. Are we a garden growing containers for souls to be harvested for some reason? Sherman answered, well, that's another good question, and all I can tell you is that one elderly man with MJ-12 told me, you don't want to know. When I asked him about souls and why the Ebens made us, some abductees also say that the main reason for the animal mutilations and human abductions has to do with the creation of a hybrid species. But no one knows whether the hybrids are supposed to replace the current Homo sapiens sapien container model. There is a sense that whatever the non-humans are up to, it has something to do with survival, theirs and ours. Sherman said, maybe. All I know is that the Ebens are supposed to have manipulated DNA in primates long before humans were created. So there must have been a series of experiments like Neanderthal before Cro-Magnon. And Neanderthal is gone. So who knows what's on the agenda for humans? Centuries of genetic manipulation by other intelligences was reinforced for me in 1999 by a retired Defense Intelligence Agency analyst. He said those alien presences have based themselves underground in various parts of this Earth, and at least one type has been terraforming this planet and genetically manipulating Earth life for some 270 million years. And he said they made the dinosaurs, that it was an 85 million year laboratory experiment, that this planet Earth is considered a laboratory. The DIA analyst was especially interested in the resurrection technology described by abductees Linda Porter. He knew all about the cloning technology from his DIA work, and he described how concerned he and his superiors were about human body containers camouflaging the conflicts of an alien presence through the often chaotic evolution of Homo sapien to Homo sapien sapien. Who are we really? Does someone else own or battle to keep ownership of Earth? Are humans unwitting pawns in a multi-level chess game? If we are, is there an alien ally, a Prometheus or Enki trying to help us advance more rapidly in order to better survive, as Sergeant CJ said? Is there truly some kind of alien threat from beyond the alien presence underground on Earth and our solar system? Like, what happens if Osiris or Zeus or Jehovah or Nabu return? Our planet is now in the midst of its 6th mass extinction of plants and animals because of humanity's spread around the planet, destroying and paving over so much ground that once sustained abundant Earth life. We are currently experiencing the worst period of die-offs since the loss of the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. Scientists estimate we're now losing animals, plants, and insects at 1,000 to 10,000 times the rate prior to the 20th century, with dozens of species going extinct every day. That means by the end of this 21st century, as many as 30 to 50% of all Earth species could be gone. Perhaps the non-human intelligences which watch this planet can see humanity's own future hanging in a balance, but will not allow humans to destroy the Earth laboratory. Perhaps that is why the aliens increased their interference at nuclear missile sites and human abductions, despite aggressive government efforts to keep everything about the alien presence a big secret. One fact is certain. No matter who made humans or why, life on Earth is not guaranteed. But if the chokehold on the truth were released and the entire human family could know everything the governments and the militaries are hiding about an alien presence on this planet that still manipulates DNA and harvests Earth life, perhaps human tribal warfare would slow down in the alien concocted Garden of Eden, where a reptile was the teacher. In November 1984, I was a speaker at the University of Nebraska with astronomer and QFOS founder J. Allen Hynek, PhD. I presented about animal mutilations, and Dr. Hynek talked about UFOs, and afterwards he said to me, "Linda, let's let our hair down with each other." And I thought, wow, I'm going to learn what Hynek really knows about UFOs and ETs. And we went to a quiet room away from the conference buzz, and to my surprise, he began with these words: the most important book I have ever read and hope that you will read too. It's Theosophy by Rudolf Steiner. And in that book, first written in 1922, Steiner summed up his understanding about the relationship between the human mind, body, and soul, and that the soul is the animating force of all matter bodies. Neither Hynek nor I knew that he would pass into another dimension only a year and a half later from a brain tumor. And I would not learn from abductees about the ET soul transfer technology for 7 more years until 1991, when abductee Linda Porter illustrated seeing the human soul life force radiating that gold-orange light as it moved from the dying man's body into another body cloned by a praying mantis and a gray Eben type. But one realization has become very true for me. There is a secret war on Earth, past, present, and probably future. One group of other intelligences want to see humans evolve into oneness with the divine field responsible for all matter worlds. Another intelligence wants to stunt human evolution so it can continue to harvest us genetically for its own self-serving purposes. This is the confusion of contradictory literature and conflicting religions throughout human history. Religious inspirations have been used to homogenize various human groups to make them more controllable by the competing intelligences, but those have often been ET manipulations, not honest guidance from the divine field. Maybe like political factions, the dark party and the light party are competing over legislation to legalize the production of cloned android life outside the force of creation's recycling program of a finite number of souls. Maybe some souls are captured and put into clone bodies, which is fouling up the divine field's process. Other clones might never receive souls. That political issue about cloning for galactic trade or alien wars might explain why dramas of resurrected saviors from Osiris in Egypt to Christ in ancient Palestine have appeared to humanity. Osiris and Christ were beings with human bodies and mysterious divinity who empathized and emphasized that death in the body does not end life for the soul and spirit. That concept underlies the Egyptian obsession with mummies and sacred rites to protect the soul at the moment of death from competing forces. If there is a finite number of souls, as the government whistleblower told me once, and that they are under a strictly regulated God force recycling program, then clone bodies and androids might end up outside, excluded from that recycling process. The full scope of this complex, multi-layered chess game for souls, spirits, and bodies of humans, extraterrestrials, angels, and time travelers might be beyond human ability to understand. One scientist in New England, who has also been abducted by gray beings who repaired his diseased heart, told me that he was shown holograms that depicted a series of universes in pairs, mirrored images, each the opposite of the other, from the subatomic to the macro. He said, quote, "Our universe is paired to another universe which is completely opposite of this one. There, the skies are glowing white with dark suns. Colors are indescribable and iridescent. Time flows to the past like a conveyor belt. At the moment of death, in our universe, we move through a tunnel to change charge in order for the soul to move into the mirror universe where it is all light. There, time moves to the past, and souls return back here in this universe in a route that he said was drawn for him by the aliens as our infinity symbol. Perhaps the unique isolation each human feels and the peculiar melancholy a dark sky filled with stars can evoke has something to do with knowledge that is buried in our genes and our souls, a sensing of ancient intimacies with other beings and other worlds. Now, in this time of revolution, when the whole world will know we are not alone in this universe, our greatest challenge as a species will be to stand up unafraid before the old gods and watchers. Ultimately, I am convinced there is a common bond among all life forms ebbing and flowing on spirals of different frequencies supported by a singular force, an invisible matrix of energy from which everything emerges and to which everything returns. Thank you, Manchester.
And with that, we reach the end. Or is it just the beginning? Linda's lecture has taken us down a rabbit hole of secrets, leaving us with one burning question. Is religion nothing more than an elaborate control system, crafted not by gods following a religion, but by something else? The UFO community whispers about aliens pulling the strings of faith, shaping our beliefs to keep us in line. Before we close this chapter, let's revisit one last piece of this puzzle. Remember Angel, the young man whose family encountered those towering gray beings in a UFO that crashed in his backyard? Well, now he's claiming when they left the property, apparently something was left behind. That changes everything.
Yeah, and I think that's the reason why Angel has pivoted from calling what he saw that night an alien instead, now calling it a demon, because he feels like he's seeing so much paranormal activity and just strange, unexplainable things happening inside of his home. There was two anecdotes, one in particular that we're about to show you that literally made the hairs on my arms stand up just because it is so freaky, so unexplainable. We have a segment of that part of the conversation. You mentioned paranormal activity. What exactly did you see?
Well, I was in another room. My brother called me, and there was a upside-down cross, and there was a Jesus statue in it. They ripped Jesus out of it. They threw him like across the room, and it was floating upside down.
Are you saying floating in the air?
Yeah, like in the air. It was floating upside down.
What did you do? I mean, did you go pick it up? Did you knock it down? Like how?
No, I didn't do nothing. I was just sitting there. I was crazy. I was like, what?
But how did it come down? It's not still floating right now, is it?
No, it came down. So we got closer to it and then dropped.
It fell to the ground. A crucifix floating in the air, upside down. The Jesus on the crucifix had been ripped off, and it was floating.
Yeah.
And you can say definitively, without lies, that that is what you saw.
Yes. Swear to God, that's what I saw.
What do you believe that is? How could something like that happen? That's not physically possible in this world. And that's just one story of many stories of paranormal activity that's happened inside this house, according to Angel. He said that the family has had to take some really drastic measures to make themselves feel safe within their home. We're going to talk more about all of that paranormal activity tomorrow night on.
But here's where the logic to this becomes questionable. What about documented miracles, the unexplainable, the divine, the moments that defy logic? Documented miracles have happened in many different religions, from Christianity to Hinduism, like the two you're about to see.
मैंने उठ करके, और दूध होगा आपके पास? मैं दूध तो ज़रूर होगा भगवान की कृपा से। तो थोड़ा सा कटोरी में दूध डाला, एक चम्मच ली, मंदिर के पट खोलने के बाद भगवान गणपति के दरबार में हम पहुंच गए। जा कर के हमने कौली में ये ऐसे हमारे पास कटोरी में हमने थोड़ा जो दूध था वो दूध डाला, और चम्मच से दूध लिया, मान कि कहाँ पी रहे हैं, तो वहाँ हम पहुँच गए। तो वो इस प्रकार से जैसे ही लगाया हमने, तो भगवान गणपति ऐसे चूस रहे जैसे ऐसे करके हम जो है नलकी से फ्रूटी वगैरह पीते हैं, ठीक उसी प्रकार से दूध अंदर, चम्मच हमने हल्का सा ऐसे किया और दूध अंदर गया।
So widespread were the reports of a miracle throughout the world that India's Federal Department of Science and Technology was asked to investigate. They were sceptical and said the molecules of milk were being drawn from the spool by the texture of the statues.
Are these simply to be ignored as aliens using a green screen effect, as Hollywood would do? Or are these the signs of proof that something greater is reaching out, ensuring we never lose sight of the truth? Thank you for watching The Storyist, where the deepest truths are hidden between the lines. Don't just watch, question everything.